So what we're going to look at is filters, camera filters. Now what they do, they modify, obviously, the colour, temperature and colours that are coming through to be seen on the film or the sensor on a camera. They've been around for ages. The most basic ones that you can see, and they were designed really for film, but they're in use today, are skylight filters. And they're normally called 1A and 1B. And what they do is, you get them all different sizes. This is a 62mm one. You can get them in everything. And I mean, very quickly before I start on this, the best way is to get a medium-sized filter and or bigger filter and step it down. So you don't buy multiple filters. You can buy step up, step down rings. Otherwise, you end up with hundreds of the same size, hundreds of filters that you don't need, because you can buy step up and step down rings between different camera lens sizes. Anyway, so skylight filter, what it do? Basically, when sunlight whizzes down, it goes through clouds and stuff like that, and it creates a blue cast for film. So an A and a B, a skylight A and a B, have a magenta tint to them, and that removes this sort of blueness. The B is stronger than the A, but they also, you see them used today as they're called UV filters, basically, and they're very useful. But you can also, the main reason you see them is to protect the end of a lens. They're not really used for filtration anymore. But yeah, these are like really cheap, easy way to protect the front of a lens, and if you shoot film, it takes a bit of blueness out of it. Okay, so that's those. Now the other filters, you probably heard a lot about these for black and white. They're like orange, amber, red, green and yellow, and what they do is change the contrast of the film. So you get better clouds, things like that. Those are used to sort of creatively control what you get with black and white film. Obviously, you don't, with digital, you don't need them. You can tweak it all afterwards. But with film, obviously, you want to make those changes in. I mean, some of them work. I can't remember, like green. What they do is they alter that light, that color frequency coming into the color light, the light wave frequency coming into the camera. So they accentuate certain things, adding contrast. I don't really shoot a lot of black and white, to tell you the truth. So I've got them, but I don't really use them that often. But they're great. You can have, if you have a look around, you can see people get some really interesting results with them, and they get the right setting to use them in. Now there's 3 filters which I think are really important. Well, they are for me, because I shoot tungsten film, movie film, and daylight film, movie film, and those filters are the 85A and 85B, and an 80A and an 80B. So what do? So when you shoot tungsten film, it's balanced for indoors for tungsten light, and it is a bit of an oddity now. You don't get as much tungsten light, people are using LEDs. So if you've got tungsten film and you want to go outside and shoot it, you need to change its color temperature to match up with outside. So you do that with an 85B. So that means you put an 85B, if you've got a roll of 800T semi-still Vision 3 500T in your camera, and you want to go and shoot it outside in broad daylight, you put one of these on it, and it sort of normalizes it for 5,600, 6,500, wherever daylight is, away from 3,200 Kelvin, which is tungsten. So basically, they're really, really handy if you shoot a lot of cinema stocks. However, you can use them very creatively. You can use tungsten film very creatively. And it's quite funny because people for years tried to work out how to get certain looks for certain movies, and all that happened in those movies were people just removed the filters. So the entire opening sequence of a film called Gladiator, which you may have seen, it's got a bit of a blue thing going on. Well, what that was they shot that with Vision 2 200T and didn't put an 85B on the front or an 85A. It's a slightly different colour temperature, but not much. So that entire opening sequence is done like that. And all of a sudden you get this look, which is amazing. Terrence Malick does this. Tree of Life was shot Vision 3 500T film and 200T, and he didn't use filtration. So you get these looks generated on movies that people desperately try and find out how to recreate. And literally all it is a difference in balance. So to go the other way, so say I'm going into a tungsten light, 3200 Kelvin environment, and I've got tungsten film in my camera, I use an 80B or an 80B or an 80A, and that will change the color temperature going into the camera to allow me to shoot daylight film in a tungsten environment. So they're the two that I use. And then there's the very, very last one. We'll have a look at this. We'll spend a bit of time on the last filter because it's a filter you cannot recreate unless you're using AI digitally. So once you've shot without this filter on, you can't go back. So and that's a polarizing filter, and they're brilliant. What polarizing filters do is they reduce the amount of reflected light that goes into the camera. Now this works with digital and this works with film. And also it enhances the contrast and the depth of colours. They're amazing things. And I still don't know how they really work. Something to do with the angle of the light hitting it. But basically there's a couple of formats. You get like a rotated one like this. And as you turn it, it introduces more polarization. You turn it the other way and it removes the polarization. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you some photographs quickly of how a polarizer works. There's a couple of types. You can actually, the circular one's the main one, but you can actually get gradiated, so it's like polarized at the top and not at the bottom. But the circular one is the one I use quite a lot. So I'm just going to show you some photos and you can sort of understand what it does. So, okay, this first one here is one of those weird Russian doll type things. And you can see on the picture, you've got glint over her eye here, and then you've got that shine on there. That's like reflected light, isn't it? So now, if I drop polarizing filter in, it's gone. And you can see that the colours are much richer and they're stronger. So I'll give you another example. Let me just pull this one up. Okay, here's an alarm clock. And you can see on the left-hand side of the alarm clock, it's got a glare of reflection hitting it. So it's a bit messy, isn't it? So I want to get rid of that. And I also want to enhance the reds in the shot. So I drop in a polarizer, turn the polarizer all the way up. I get this. You can see the reflection has completely gone on the side. The actual reflection on the top of the table is clearer, and the red on the top of the two the bell things is much deeper. I'll try and find another example for you here. Here's a classic. Look, this is a double glazed window, and you can see the reflection of the middle strut in the glass. So that's not very pleasant. So I want a clean window frame. I don't want the reflection hitting it. So I drop in the polarizer and it's gone. You can see this is really useful, especially if you're shooting water. That's where it becomes really effective, because you've got glare on the top of the water. If you drop in a polarizer, then basically you can remove the glare and you can see through. And this is what I'm saying is it can't be reproduced in post-production, because if that glare's there, there's no information behind it. It doesn't matter if it's digital or film, it's gone. So you need this. I've used polarizers so much. You can get polarizing gel, like film. You can put over windows. You can put it over the one you use it a lot with is cars. If you're filming a car, it's just glints everywhere. So you can polarize on the camera, or you can also polarize on the windshield as well. And they use polarized glass in large car showrooms and shops, because obviously you want people to see in. When the sun's moving around, you want people to see into your shop. You don't want it obscured by reflections. So polarizers are incredibly useful. And it's one of those things where, you don't think about them, you don't realise about them. They're great for landscape photography as well, and it's also to do with the angle, with the sun. I'd highly recommend that. I think they're not very cheap. If you shoot film, I'd get one and have a play with it. But obviously, if you've got a digital camera, then see what you can do with a digital camera first, and you work out, because obviously an old polarizer I've got, it's got no markings on it as to where, but you can see it drop in, you can see it sort of get darker. But they're incredibly powerful polarizers, and they're very, very useful. They can make your pictures look amazing. And last but not least, whilst I've got pictures up, what I'm going to do is just show you the difference, what tungsten film looks like in daylight. Here we go. That's the alarm clock again. That's tungsten film, non-filtration. So you get that blue look, Gladiator. And then if I drop an 85B over the front of it, then it's like now back to normal. Okay, and the last thing I think just to say about filters is any kind of filter, pretty much, there's a light loss on going into the camera. So it's fine with through TTL, through the lens metering, because the meter will take into account that there's a filter on the front and adjust its exposure accordingly. Where you get problems is with rangefinders or sort of cameras like this one, the Yashica. The metering on this camera is done here. So if I put a filter over the front, I do this quite a lot with this camera actually. If you put a filter over the front, it doesn't know to take into account the light loss. I think polarizers are like 2 stops. Some of these color filters with black and white are 1 stop, half a stop, things like that. So it won't know. So you'll be underexposing your shot. So when you do it with these kind of rangefinders, you need to put the filter on and adjust, work out, when you buy it, it'll tell you what the light loss is. And then you can adjust it the ISO to make sure that you're shooting it accordingly. It's not too much of an issue, as I said, with TTL, but I mean, you can sort of tweak it slightly to make sure that, it's done properly. You can come down like a half a stop or something like this. I mean, I've got a massive polarizer on the front of this Zoom, basically, and it's huge. I mean, it just rotates round, and you'll see it like drop in. Incredibly useful. Slide film and polarizers is like a recipe for amazing photography because of the color rendition from slide. But yeah, that's it. I mean, they're really interesting to use. I don't shoot, as I said, I don't really shoot too much black and white, but I know that those color filters, the greens, the reds, and all that have great effects on the films, on the photographs. But the 2 I use are the 80B, 80A, 85A, 85B, because I shoot lots of motion picture stock. So I like to have the opportunity to like shoot one and switch. Sometimes I'll go full gladiator mode and just leave the filtration off the front. You can get really interesting results if you can. This is actually partly what they did with Gladiator. If you shoot unfiltered tungsten film in daylight with a polarizer, you get quite interesting results. Anyway, I think I've covered everything there on filters. I hope that's useful. Get yourself a polarizer, get yourself some motion picture film, and get these filters and have a play. It's really, really good fun. It gives really interesting results from film, and the polarizer is great for digital as well. And if you do any filming, like with proper filming, you should know about polarizers by now. But using polarizing gels, polarizing stuff is just fantastic to get rid of those reflections you just don't want. Anyway, I hope that's useful. Thanks for watching.